First of all, I just have to say, Maya and Emma, thank you so much. I actually learned a great deal listening to you, and I appreciate that. So now it's time for our legislative session. I will, by way of explanation, Marco is a little delayed. We'll be here shortly, but we're going to go ahead and start with the introductory comments from the rest of our panel. I think everyone has kind of met everyone now through comments, so I won't spend any time on introductions other than to say we have 2 Utah state legislators and a member of Danish Parliament, and then we'll shortly be joined by the EU Commissioner for Italy. So this will be an interesting perspective on all of the things we're talking about. There are different perspectives that come when you've served an elected office, and I, for one, really look forward to hearing these the positions of these good folks and friends. So should we just go down the row? Senator Weiler, should we begin with you?
Sure. I'm Todd Weiler. You want me to do the whole 10 minutes or just a brief introduction?
Do your whole 10 minutes.
Oh, my goodness. I'm Todd Weiler. I'm here with my wife, Elizabeth, and we live in Woods Cross, Utah, which is next to Bountiful, which is a little bit better known. I've been serving in the Utah State Senate since 2012. And so I'm an old-timer and really enjoyed my service there. And about 2% of my work in terms of the bills that I've passed have been related to the topics that we're talking about here today. When I joined, it was really important to me that I didn't get, I didn't want it to be easy to say, oh, Weiler only does this issue or that issue. It was really important to me to be diversified. So I've worked a lot. I'm probably best known for my work in the anti-pornography space, protecting children from pornography, and I'll get into that in a moment. But this is my first time in Brussels. I've switched planes here before, but I'd never spent any time here before, and just really enjoying the local fare. But I was intrigued yesterday. My wife and I went to Bruges, and we took a walking tour for about 2.5 hours, and I learned about the Battle of the Golden Spurs. And if you're not familiar, in 1302, I'm sure all of you learned this in history, there was kind of a Flemish uprising, and so the King of France sent out a couple hundred soldiers to quell the rebellion. And these people, they just had their sharp wooden sticks, and they just went and poked all these French military people in the face and killed them. And so they sent 800 more, and they set up in this area where it looked like the French would be charging downhill at them and they'd have to charge uphill back. But what they didn't realize was it was all wetlands. And so the French soldiers, they got mired in all of this mud. And it was quite easy for 200 or 300 peasants to basically kill 800 soldiers. And that story resonated with me because I think as legislators, it's easy to step somewhere where you don't know how sure of a footing it is, and to get mired in the mud, if you will, of policy, and so that's something that I've really tried to avoid, but haven't always been successful. So for those of you that came to Salt Lake in November, I think I mentioned that 2 years ago I passed a bill that would require, at least for Utah, people logging in from Utah without a VPN, for porn companies to verify the age of the consumer. And in the United States, I haven't researched Europe, but in the United States, in all 50 states, and this is news to most people, it's illegal for a child to view pornography or sexual material harmful for children, is sometimes how we legislate it. It's illegal in all 50 states for an adult to show that material to a child, but those laws are not enforced. And anyways, I made a comment earlier this morning about how these massive billion-dollar porn companies, they pretended like, well, how could we possibly tell who's logging onto our websites to view our material, which is just a joke. But in response to this legislation, it went into effect a week ago, 2 years and a week ago, and my wife and I happened to be in Barcelona the morning it went into effect. There was a time change, and so it was night in Utah. And Pornhub, which is I think the largest distributor in the world, For the Utah users, they threw up this screen. So instead of people accessing their adult material at 10:30 at night, they instead saw a screen that said to contact me. And so my phone started ringing off the hook. There is no hook on my cell phone, but at 4:30 in the morning in Barcelona. Fortunately, we had an early flight home, and so we'd gotten up at 4 a.m. So I'm fielding all these calls from these angry men who are looking for something that wasn't my face, so that getting mired in the mud is applicable when you're dealing with those pornography things. But interestingly about that bill is in several states have copied what we've done in Utah when it comes to trying to protect children from pornography. But on this particular bill, I had copied Louisiana. And there's a certain legislator in Louisiana, and she's run 2 or 3 of my Utah bills in Louisiana, but then this one, I kind of returned the favor and ran her Louisiana bill. But here's what's remarkable. When the Louisiana bill went into effect just a few months before Utah, Pornhub complied with it, but their clicks went down 85% because people don't want to say, oh, I'm Joe Smith. They want to use that they like the anonymity. And so after watching that happen in Louisiana, they adopted a different strategy in Utah and said, we don't know how to do this. And they clearly knew how to do it in Louisiana. So they turned off the spigot to Utah. And then I still get accused of blocking Pornhub in Utah. The crazy thing about that is that I couldn't have done that if I tried, because it's pornography in the United States, for some silly reason, is protected by the First Amendment. This goes all the way back to the 1960s U.S. Supreme Court decisions. And so they basically did what we could never have done legislatively. And so thank you, Pornhub. Thank you for making me a star in Utah. But I want to focus more in whatever's left of my 10 minutes, I want to focus more on a bill I did this year. And I ran the original bill in 2016 to declare pornography a public health crisis in Utah. I had late night talk show hosts, Jimmy Kimmel, Jimmy Fallon, making fun of me. The issue ended up on the cover of Time magazine, and I was mentioned in the cover story. My face was not on Time magazine, but I got invited as a guest on the short-lived Chelsea Handler show when she had her own show. I got flown out to LA and treated like a celebrity for a couple hours. But the issue, but I got made fun of, and what my intern that year had set up a search. I think it's called a Google search, but she had set up. Anyways, if my name, Todd, Weiler, and Utah Senate all appear in an article, I'll get a link to it emailed me just automatically for free. And that in about a month, I had like 3,000 articles emailed to me, because this just went all across the world. And I would open articles that were written in Korean and Serbian Croatian and in Persian. And I don't read any of those languages, but it was interesting because the word pornography is always spelled out in English in all of those articles. And then, of course, I could read my own name. So I knew that they were basically what the AP had run and then been translated other stories. But this caught wind, and I was accused of all sorts of things, and people were questioning my motivation. But what's fascinating is after a couple of years, 15 other states followed us, and so I don't look as silly now as I did, I guess, in 2016. But what I did this year, the bill I passed this year, it's Senate Bill 142 in Utah, I'm probably the most excited about, and I'll keep it very short. So I know that the Ericksons rented a car for their trip. So let me just put you on the spot. Have you two ever rented a car when your kids were with you?
Yes.
Okay. Did Hertz or whoever, did they ask your kids to come up to the counter and sign the car rental contract?
No.
No, and that would be silly. That would be ridiculous. We know kids can't enter contracts, right? Except when they're downloading apps. Every single time you download an app on Apple or Google or whatever you have in your pocket, it asks you to accept the terms and conditions. And the terms and conditions of those apps often give the app developer permission to access your microphone, sometimes your camera, but almost always to access your data, and frequently to harvest and sell your data. We have 7-year-olds and 8-year-olds and 10-year-olds and 11-year-olds entering into legally binding contracts, giving software developers, tens of thousands of them all over the world, access to all of their data. How many of you are comfortable with that? So we banned that in Utah this year, starting, this year, and we had to delay the implementation dates. And boy, Apple and Google, they came out of the woodwork to lobby against this bill, and they're not at all happy about it. And they were like, well, what if we just say a 16-year-old is an adult? No. So what this bill does is it tethers a minor's account to their parents. So if your kid, so all of our kids, I think, Elizabeth, correct me if I'm wrong, at some point downloaded Snapchat. And we had no idea. And our kids are good. They all went on missions. They're all married in the temple, if you're LDS. Our kids are good. But I would have really liked to have known when they were downloading Snapchat, because I didn't know what Snapchat was probably when they started. So once our bill's into effect, a parent is going to get a notification on their phone saying, little Johnny's downloading Snapchat. Will you accept the terms and conditions? And then this restores your parental abilities to say, oh, hell no. Sorry, Bruce and Jim. Or whatever. But this is how it should be. And so the internet, and especially smartphones, they snuck up on society. Back in the 1950s and 1960s in the United States, we had the Motion Picture Association that said, if you're under 17, you can't see an R-rated film. But the technology snuck up on us. And we're working in Utah to try to hit the reset button and put parents back in control of their families.
Awesome. And on the porn emails, they put up all the legislators' contacts. So at like 10 at night in Utah, I was getting all these emails from men from their mom's basement.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
And they were telling me, I can't access my porn because of you. And I went, woo! And my husband was like, what's wrong? And I was like, because if this grown man cannot access his porn, a 14-year-old boy cannot. And I emailed the man back, and I was like, you're welcome. Hope your life turns out okay. I'm not feeling bad at all about this. So it definitely had the effect we had hoped, and Pornhub did not get what they wanted out of it. So,
they sued us and lost, actually.
Yeah, exactly. So Senator Weiler's did a great job there. So I, again, represent Pierucci from Utah. I represent Harriman and Riverton. And I have been in the legislature for 6 years now. And I put together my thoughts, but we'll probably go off script too. But I firmly believe in the principles of limited government, conservatism and free markets, and the power of families and faith in our communities. And one of the reasons I jumped in to run, I was 27 when I ran for office. I'm the youngest elected woman in Utah. And I jumped in because I felt like we needed someone in the legislature who was going through the grind of raising a family and balancing a family budget, and felt really strongly, both my husband and I felt really strongly that the time was now that we need to jump in. And I can tell you exactly how much diapers and formula cost and what it's like to buy a home. And so that was something really important to me. I'll tell you, family is incredibly important. I grew up I'm one of 4 siblings. I'm the oldest child. I feel like oldest children run the world. And then the second children make all the money. And so, but to me, family is much more than a group of people that you're connected to by blood. It's the foundation of who we are. And it's where we first learn how to love and how to trust and how to share and how to stand up when life knocks us down. Brene Brown talks about how family is where we learn to dance, right? It's where we learn to interact with other people. And my love of politics actually comes from my father, who would come home and we'd talk about whatever Michael Savage was talking about on the radio that day, and we'd have a fiery discussion, and I think he hoped that my brothers would catch the flame of politics and policy, but it was me. And honestly, he instilled in me my work ethic and a sense of pride in our country and wanting to improve it. And families really are our first teachers, and it's where we learn our values and traditions, and they play such an integral role in society. I was just telling Jeanette, we need to have her come present to our representatives because we should be talking more about the family and the consequences that our policies have on them. So I wanted to rapid fire through a long list of policy ideas, and then we can talk more if you'd like about any that intrigue you. But I actually chair the Education Committee in Utah, and I really believe in having robust education options for our children. So whether that's homeschool or private school or charter schools and traditional district schools, I think parents should be the one in the driver's seat to best tailor their children's education. and we know education is critical for success. And so education has been an area that I've worked a lot in on policy. So let me talk about some of the family-friendly policies Utah's passed. So one thing that we've done that was really big was we created a parent liaison with the Utah State Board of Education. So for other countries, whoever your Department of Education would be, we created a parent's office there that parents could call if they were having an issue with their district or classroom to get it addressed. I also worked on, it was a really controversial bill, a radical idea, to use Mateo's line, similar to a voucher program, a backpack funding bill. It was the Utah Fits All Scholarship Program that allowed parents to apply for a scholarship to go towards private school, homeschool, or micro schools. And we prioritized it first for low-income and middle-class families who historically school choice hasn't been an opportunity for them. So that is something that has been in operation, and the stories coming from families are incredible. I've had so many moms reach out who have said, this has changed our life, this has saved my kid's life. And we have a very large homeschool population in Utah. So it's sad to hear, was it Vincenzo or who had said that you're not allowed to homeschool in some countries? That's bizarre. And to me, from an American perspective, and Utah has some of the friendliest homeschool laws in the country. In fact, we just got rid of the affidavit. Before this year, you'd have to sign that said, I, the parent, am responsible for my child's education. I'm homeschooling them. We just got rid of that. And now if a parent wants to do that, they don't even have to sign the affidavit. So we have a really robust homeschool program. We have very robust charter schools to try and create choice in education and innovation in our education space. What comes with choice is free market principles of competition, which is healthy, in my opinion. And I think it means then that people and teachers and administrations have to be more responsive to parents and their students, that they're learning better. After the Fits All scholarship went into effect, I had a teacher reach out who told me that they now at their staff meetings, their principal said, you need to respond to parents or we're going to lose them to this scholarship. And they were worried about their funding. And so introducing competition in education is super controversial, but I'll tell you it has the bang for its buck. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we are prioritizing students over systems, which a lot of the structure ends up feeding itself. I also wanted to highlight, we have worked a lot on sex education. It's like the issue that we never stop working on in our state, but you have to have parental consent. It's in 7th and 8th grade, so about 12 or 13 years old, and you have to have your parents sign the form that you can take the class. It's abstinence only. It's focused on the biology side of things, but most recently, we had a legislator, and I supported this, was that you cannot teach on sexual orientation. That's not the job of a teacher to talk about what you might prefer or transitioning, that's all something that should be happening at the home. And we've tried to work towards...
The teaching should be happening.
Exactly. The teaching should be happening at home. And quite frankly, that topic should be taught in the context of the home with your parents walking you through it. So those are some of the things that we've done in education. We really have tried to keep parents in the driver's seat and continue to do so. And we are the youngest state in the country. I have the second youngest district in the state. So education comes up a lot. It was interesting to hear the little policy tweaks that make politicians have to respond. Education's a big topic in Utah because we have a lot of kids and we are really young and we have robust families. And so that's one that we're constantly honing in on, and I'm glad that we are even more so moving towards the side of education freedom. I'll tell you, if there's one good thing that came from the pandemic and the government's responses, it's that parents woke up. And we had these groups that they started out, Moms Want to See My Smile. They're pushing against the mask mandate. You had different things with the vaccine. And Americans generally just want government to leave them alone. And when you start messing with them, they wake up. And so there has been a whole army, and I would say of moms and dads, but a lot of moms that have re-entered politics in Utah. And I think that's healthy. So those are some of the things we've done in education. I see them a lot in my committee. But to fly through some of the tax credits we do and exemptions, they might be in the margins, but for people who have a family, they can make a difference. And there's something that I think should be done to have the conversation at the very least. But in Utah, we did not want to do a typical child care subsidy because those only go directly, they're usually through federally funded or grants that go to childcare facilities or daycare. But we have this discussion on what if a mom wants to stay home? Are we then jeopardizing penalizing a family that chooses to have a parent stay home, takes the economic hit, but isn't taking a kid to childcare? So instead of a childcare tax credit, we did an additional child tax credit from the age of 0 to 4 that you get an additional amount of your taxes back for you to keep, because we don't, however you choose to raise your family is important, but we're not just going to do a child care tax credit. We also give a double tax exemption in your first year of birth. So recognizing that formula and diapers cost a lot, we're going to double that tax exemption. One thing that was really big that I pushed for was maternity leave for teachers in our state. In education, we kept hearing teachers are leaving 4 to 5 years after they've got into the teaching profession. We don't know what's going on. And I said, I do. They're having kids. Like, my gosh. And Chick-fil-A provides maternity leave. How do the districts not, right? So Starbucks will give you a year off. So anyways, we worked through that, and that was really big. And then a couple big wins from this session, and then I'll close because I know we're running low on time, is infertility and in vitro fertilization treatment. So 1 in 8 couples in the United States cannot have children naturally. That number is actually slightly higher in Utah, and I am one of those couples. So this last session, we passed a bill that we actually will pay for IVF for families, which for our state employees, which is a huge benefit. And I had a lot of young couples reach out who are really excited about that. We also provide a tax credit for adoption expenses. So we've really tried hard to think about family in our tax structure and make sure we're not penalizing people for it. I agree, I don't know anyone who has a baby because they want that extra child dependent tax exemption, but when you're paying for the formula and diapers, you can appreciate it. And then I will just really quickly say we created the Office of Families within the executive branch because we wanted to have a permanent office that was keeping an eye out on policy for families in our state. And then we've done a lot on, has been highlighted on digital and social media, but we also have the ability that one of the first bills, I believe, that was run by Representative Tusher is families can actually sue social media companies for damages. We just banned cell phones from the classroom to have students focusing on learning. And then we have what's called the Safe UT app that I wanted to mention. If you haven't heard of it, you can Google it, Safe UT for Utah. And essentially, it's a mental health screening. And knock on wood, there's wood somewhere. Utah has never had a shooting, and we have school shooting. Todd's my fact checker. I'm getting to it. But, no, we've never had a school shooting in Utah, and we really try hard to make sure students are getting the treatment they need, and it's because of this app. So every student generally downloads it starting in 6th grade. And if they're ever having a rough day, they can go on and immediately get connected to a counselor, and then their parents are connected with that counselor. We get anonymous tips all the time on there about people who are in a rough spot. And so we've really tried to combat that loneliness, the suicide issue, I would say, it's become a crisis, and other issues that this rising generation is seeing with all the technology we've introduced them to. So I will put a pin in it for now.
Can I just add? Everyone and their brother came to me this year and wanted to opt out their app from my contract bill I just told you about. The banks, Wells Fargo and Zions Bank, they're like, we don't have any porn on our app. So I'm like, this isn't a porn bill, this is a contract bill. But the one app, the only one app I opted out was the Safe UT app, because if a kid is contemplating suicide and they want to download the app for help and their parents are going to be notified, some of those kids would be too afraid to do that. So that's the one app we opted out.
Lisa?
Yes, thank you. Well, first of all, this has been very interesting so far. My head is completely filled with things I have to organize when I go back. Lots of very valuable information. And just one of the things you were speaking about now, maternity leave. Mm-hmm. And I speak from a Danish perspective, obviously, which is interesting to hear from the American perspective, and also other countries in Europe where you don't have this big welfare state that we have in Denmark. So I almost want to call it the Danish paradox, because, and Matteo, you touched upon it a little bit. We already have so many of these family-friendly policies implemented. We have universal healthcare. We have heavily subsidized daycare, so access to affordable daycare, and we have paid parental leave, really good conditions for maternity leave. We have 5 weeks paid vacation every year. We have a sick leave when your child is sick, and we have job protection, long-term 2 years of job security payment if you lose your job. We call it the flex security model. So we have really good safety nets implemented in Denmark, and so it's so interesting for me with this exchange to realize we have similar problems still. We also have falling birth rates. We also have a decline in the institution of marriage, and we have frustration in parents. Even though, as I mentioned, we will have expats come to Denmark and be so excited about the systems we have in place, but many Danish families are feeling frustrated, just as in many of your countries. And Jenny, you mentioned a little bit about an awakening, and I just want to start off by mentioning, I think mostly I'm just part of this awakening. I am just a mom who has chosen to go a different route than the norm in Denmark, and I've experienced some of the issues that come from the system that we have in place in Denmark. And an increasing number of parents are feeling this frustration, and some are organizing themselves in nonprofits and organizations. For example, one is called Take Your Children Home. We're seeing an increase in women wanting to stay at home. We have lots of women on doing part-time work, and there's sort of this awakening, a movement. We have influencers that are leaning into this topic. And so some will go that route, and for some reason my route has become political because from my perspective, I've seen some of the systems we have in place in Denmark be kind of I call it in Danish, a stick in the wheel for this culture that is actually emerging. So in many ways I see policy as, what I want to do with policy is change it so that it makes room for these cultural evolutions that are underway. So what is wrong in Denmark, since we have similar problems, but we have these many supportive systems in place for the family? One of the things that I personally think is that, and it's been touched upon a little bit already, is the systems we have in place has in large been in the focus of liberating parents from the bonds of family. It's been to liberate the woman from motherhood in many ways, so that she could enter the workforce. Even daycare, if you want to look at it very black and white, daycare is instituted to free up the woman for the workforce, which is good. I think it's good, and I support that. But many of our systems, maybe with the exception of parental leave when you have a child, we have about a year available. Most of our systems are with the focus of the labor market. And I almost want to say it's not family policy, it's labor market policy. And I want to give you 2 examples of my 2 main points. So this is one of my main points, is that our family policy systems are labor market systems. And a recent example that I find very both tragic and hilarious is there is an uprising, there is a greater focus on this family policy. And women like me are stepping forward and saying, hey, we actually want to have this on the agenda. And many politicians are tapping into that. They want to address it. But mostly what happens in Denmark, it's increased state. Let's do more of the policies and the systems that we have. And just for those who don't know, we have approximately 50% tax rate, and we have and we have a huge amount of redistribution of wealth. So if it doesn't end at this, and if we don't solve the problems at this point, then how far are we going to go? How many systems are we going to put in place? And so an example was a former minister of ours. We also have one in the room now, but not her. Another former minister from Denmark. She stepped up and wanted to suggest a policy to address an increasing amount of parents' frustration about how to balance family life and their demands in their jobs. Her suggestion was that kindergartens should begin in Copenhagen to send their staff to pick up the children in the morning from the families' homes to reduce the stress for the parents that are coming with having to get the children ready and drop them off, and it's stressful. Maybe they're crying when you leave them there, and it's very stressful, and it's a stressful way to begin your morning when you have a job to do. And so her suggestion, very well-meaning, is introduced as a family policy concept, is we want to help families. So we're going to pick up their children in the morning. And to me, this is just highlighting the very lens we think of children through. It's a burden to our opportunity to do our jobs good, to do our jobs well. And children are in many ways seen as a burden to this labor market focus. We criticize her heavily from our side of the aisle, but many people feel like it's a legitimate solution to their problem, because the problem is for them right there in that moment, this is so stressful. How can I both send my children here and then be at work on time, and they're crying, they don't want to let me go. And so this is the lens with which we have created family policy. So I think that's a great part of the problem is the underlying premises of the systems that we put into place. And then another problem I think we face in Denmark is that with these great intentions to support and help, it started off around the 60s with very good intentions of supporting and freeing up the parents to also have something else than just their family and being able to better provide. But we have slowly but surely created a system that is so complex that it's starting to collapse under its own weight. And I have another funny example of how this can look in Denmark. So we have, and I mentioned it last in November as well, we have many boxes of support. So one of the boxes of support we have is for people with disabilities, also mental disabilities, for example, ADHD. So you can struggle, and we've created a box for that. If you struggle with this, then we have these subsidies and we have this help for you. And a recent debate in Denmark was an influencer who is very wealthy but also has ADHD. She was able to get public support, publicly funded 15-hour assistant. A 15-hour-a-week assistant for her business because she has ADHD. So we do these things on the one hand because we have these universal support systems, these boxes, and you fit the box and you get the support. But on the other hand, we have children with real serious problems with diagnoses, and they can't get help for months or years, and they don't have a school that can support them in their needs and teach them in a way that helps them flourish. So we have this very complex system where on the one hand, you can't get the support that you need, but also we have people who, in all seriousness, when you use your head, it doesn't make sense that you have other people pay for an assistant in your company. It doesn't make sense. But in the systems we created, this is fair game. This is legal. It's the way it's supposed to be. This is the help that you are entitled to. And so it's an example of how we've created such a welfare state instead of a welfare society where things no longer necessarily make sense in what we're doing. And this obviously makes it very difficult to reduce tax because it's very costly to do what we're doing. So just to wrap up, I think in many ways we have our society or welfare system or welfare model was intended to support families, but it's grown too complex and too large so that it's now competing with families. So instead of thinking, how can we support parents to have a nice, the opportunity to choose to have a quiet, normal morning, then we think, how can we release them of the burden, even more, of the burden of family? And I think this whole, it's been mentioned a lot, of storytelling. I think from my perspective, politicians are not only lawmakers, we are also storytellers. And in Denmark, it's you propose a policy, but then there's a story around that policy. And one of the things that I am aiming to try and do, just as a mom who wants to change some policies, is to help promote the storytelling around family and shift it from being something so labor market focused and shifting it back to the family having its own core meaning and own core value. We are not underperformers as mothers. We do something very specific that's very valuable to society. So yeah, I'll wrap it up there and we can discuss further.
Marco, welcome. Would you like to
Yes, thank you very much. First of all, let me apologize for being late. It's not something I usually do, and I'm quite ashamed. I can assure you that it is family related because I have workers at home, and I needed for my wife to come back because she had gone to pick up one of the kids. But anyway, I really apologize for being late and for missing what the speakers before me have been saying, which must have been very, very interesting. Look, from the European perspective, it is actually we have a lower number of tools available for the simple reason that in our policies we need to, of course, take into consideration the limits that the treaties are giving us, and we have to take into consideration that any policy of ours must fit 27 different states with different legislations and mentalities. But for instance, this morning I saw it hit the news, the fact that yesterday a minister from a country that I'm not mentioning but that I know very well, and I see another person from that same nationality, I'm just casually looking at him. So a minister was proposing in the council to have something European to avoid children to have smartphones before they're 14. And this was hitting the news, because it was such a big thing. Everyone was concerned with the fact that will the EU push that far? We don't know, but at least this is the level of ambition our policies can have if these kind of things hit the news. Now, basically, the main policy tools we have been already putting into place for families, regard of course the labor market as in Denmark, for instance. So basically, the European Commission last year issued this demography toolbox, which is a collection of tools for the member states, basically, in order for them to tackle let's say, the most pressing policy priorities deriving from demographic trends. Since it is really something that each state perceives in a different way, we had to we couldn't take a one-size-fits-all approach, and we had to give each one of them the tools that were available and that could really help. And this is built around 4 pillars, and one of them is actually young families. Now, the idea is let's put in place all the conditions that allow people to not have to choose between career and family, because this is one of the most important things. Of course, the work-life balance directive, which will be reviewed during this mandate, is a pillar of this part of the strategy. But of course, it's still related to work and life. So it's much it has much to do with the choice usually women have regarding career choice and having a family. We are actually also trying to investigate, to research the fertility gap, meaning the gap between the number of children desired and the actual one. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Why? Because we hope that by shedding some light on this difference, we may find out what can be some policies that we can actually target to prevent this gap from forming, actually, because this is the aim. We're not pushing necessarily, but at least we want to give people freedom to make their life choices in their full awareness, etc. We are also in the current mandate. There is also a commissioner in charge of the intergenerational fairness, which comprises, of course, all aspects of life. What I like to say is that children are old people of tomorrow, and old people are young people of yesterday. So there should not be a contradiction between policies for young and old people, but we should try to harmonize things in such a way that there is such kind of fairness. But my reflection today has more to do with maybe the sociology around it. When I was a child, I remember, I've been saying this also to some people around. When I was a child, I remember my parents had a very small car, and we were like 5, 6, 7 with the children of the neighbors, etc., all together in these small cars, going anywhere we needed to go. Now you have your first child. The sea, usually, yes, that was, and in that small car there were also the big umbrella for the sea, or the food for the whole day, etc. Okay, right. So Exactly. You confirm that. Right now you have your first child, and of course, if you don't buy a station wagon, then all the things of the child won't fit in the car, no? So something is changing also in the perception of what it means to have children. Now children are like a project, something you have to groom, you have to grow in such a way that they can do, maybe they can give you the flowers and the fruits you want. Not necessarily, I'm not sure it is the way it should be, but anyway, I'd rather think of them as birds that one day have to fly on their own, but anyway, but this is really changing, and I think that in that word, actually, maybe it was a simpler word, I don't know, it's definitely a different word, but maybe also that it was less compulsory also for the cost of life to have at least 2 incomes in a family. Back in that word, there was much less pressure. I think that also, maybe from our point of view, I don't want to change the word that much, of course. There are some reasons if things changed, not necessarily evolved, but definitely changed. But I think that maybe also in the way we collect the statistics about well-being, about wealth, etc. Maybe we should a bit think again about this obsession about the GDP. Yeah, of course, it captures a lot of things, but what about the stay-at-home mothers? They're not captured by the stats, and it's still they are providing very high quality. Usually, not always, but many of them are providing a very high quality service to their children. We should think again of that. Recently, I was reading that, and I felt very guilty because myself, I'm below that threshold. I read that if there are 2 or more children sleeping in the same room, it's housing poverty. Really, let's think about it. Let's talk about it again, because really, maybe we're going too far. And this is something I wanted to highlight as well as a reflection at this stage. Of course, the Commission cannot change anything regarding that, but maybe at least when it comes to measuring, we might do something, and we should. Mm-hmm. I stop here for now.
So this is a unique opportunity to talk to legislators. So I don't want to impose on opening up the question too much, but I do want to ask one question before we open it up more broadly. Given the concern that we're all seeing about lowering birth rates and barriers to family formation, with a full recognition that families are critically important, are we at a moment of risk that government could potentially go too far in its efforts to facilitate family formation? Todd, let's start with you and just go down the road.
I think we are, and this is a little bit related, but a comment I wanted to get in this morning. It's amazing to me what the federal government does in the United States to discourage families. And I'll give you one example just from our life circle, but we have a close relative who has a sister, and she is disabled. And she was in a care center, which is paid for by Medicaid. And she met a guy, she's in her mid-20s, who's willing to care for her. They're both members of the church. And so she's now moved in to his home. But if they get married, then his income would be calculated and would kick her off of Medicaid. And she's got caregivers that supplement and things. And so they're now living in sin because if they get married, then and we have numerous situations where people who want to get married are forced to not get married, or else they risk losing federal benefits. Now, I understand we can't give Medicaid to everyone, right? We're not going to give it to Bill Gates and to Elon Musk. Of course, he's not born in the United States. But anyway, but the fact that we have governmental policies that are really preventing people from getting married, that want to get married, actually keeps me up awake at night, because it's just so bothersome to me.
I agree with that.
I would say absolutely, and even some of the stories I hear from the other side of the pond make me uncomfortable because we fought a revolution over taxes. So our tax rate, I think the highest is 37%, the lowest is 10. So there are trade-offs.
And we
right?
won that revolution for anybody that was keeping score.
But I'm just saying, but you get, right, there's a trade-off in how you view government, and I understand I'm coming at this from an American perspective as well, whereas a lot of today, what I've been thinking is we need to re-engage parents. If you've seen The Incredibles, when the wife goes, "Engage, Bob!" like, that's what we need right now, is we need this engagement. And so I do worry, and as chair of education, people always bring ideas and say, wouldn't it be awesome if we taught that at schools? What if we start bringing nurses to schools? What if we start doing this at schools? And schools can just teach everything. And it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Parents are the primary caregivers. And they are the ones who, if they're falling down on the job, we need to wake up parents and say, hey, look at this data. Look what's happening to your children. I will also just say, too, we had a policy, to get to your point, chronic absenteeism is something in our schools that we've been fighting in the United States, I think across the world. After COVID, it confused kids when we said you didn't have to go to school and now you have to go back, right? But there were all these government programs and policies people were coming up with. And finally, one school district said, we're calling the moms. They called the mom and they said, we have over 50% of our kids are chronically absent at the school. It was terrible. And the mom said, give me 24 hours. She called all the moms in the neighborhood, and they now parole the halls. And they stop the kids and say, hey, where are you going? You got to get back to class. And they have cut their absenteeism in half by just unleashing the power of mama bears. And so I feel like if we could just, it feels very adversarial sometimes, government versus parents, schools versus parents, but if we would work in tandem, I think you'd actually have major headway. And so we do have to be careful that we don't overcorrect and have unintended consequences. One last example, Social Security, which now has become like this bedrock right in the third rail that no politician will touch in America. But before it was created, families lived by their parents. They needed to take care of them. If you look at a heat map, pre-Social Security and post-Social Security, you will see children living streets down from their parents. After Social Security, across the country, because they no longer had to live next to mom and dad and grandma and grandpa because the government was going to provide that. So there are unintended consequences when we pass something that we don't see for generations.
Interesting. Lisa, perspective on that?
Well, I think certainly yes, and I hope that we as a Nordic country can serve as an example of these systems. Just building these welfare systems will not fix the problem alone. I think we are in many ways proof of that. It is much more to do with culture and narrative and how we speak about family and how it's valued in society. And policy can support that, I think at least make room for that. And just because something is right or good doesn't mean that it should be implemented through law or a system. And that's one of the things that we're really trying to focus on from our perspective in Denmark, is that good things, if it's a good idea and it's good, can spread naturally through inspiration. It doesn't need to be mandated from the top down. Actually, sometimes it can make things a lot worse. And I also think that, yes, fertility matters, family formation matters, but it doesn't matter as much as family happiness and finding meaningfulness in your family life. So you can probably, if you would like to, in a very communist kind of way, just implement laws that would get the fertility and young family formation. That's probably possible in some sort of dictatorship. But so that alone is not the goal. And I do think that's very important when we're trying to address these issues as politicians, that we cannot control our way to perfect fertility rates, or we can incentivize and support a culture, and that's my take on it. Is we're culture supporters and not culture creators. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I think that actually the question is very American as a European. I mean, when I first came to Brussels, when I first moved to Brussels, I remember people telling me, it was in the middle of the financial crisis, and people were telling me, I'm an economist by training, People are telling me, yeah, don't worry, you will always have a job here. Brussels is counter-cyclical. The more issues there are, the more work there is. Okay, so there is a crisis. Good, even better for us, because the people will ask us for solution. I will just give you an example of that is not policy related, luckily enough, but that it gives you, let's say, the idea of the average European voter mentality, at least. When my wife was first pregnant, I remember once I was in my office. I had a colleague sharing the office with me. I was speaking on the phone with her, and at a certain moment she told me, sorry, I'm sick, I need to hang up. So my colleague saw that I hung up suddenly without even saying bye, and she said, what happened? No, she felt a bit sick. And my colleague looked at me and saying, yeah, but do something. What could I do? She was like a couple of kilometers away from me. She was feeling sick in that moment. A pregnant woman is just normal that is sick in the first trimester. And still, the average voter will tell you, do something.
Yeah.
So I don't think that in Europe there is something like, will the government go too far? No. They will always ask you to do more.
Can't possibly go far enough.
Yeah. Fix my problems.
Thank you. Let's open it up for questions.
By speaking as a president of a NGO like FAFSE, I think that my experience, many governments, they can put in practice very interesting measures for families. But the difference for me is the goal. Why they do that? Because sometimes if they want to impose a model, they do what they want in order to impose a model. If on the other side, the governments, the states, the legislators want not to impose a model, but to make the families following their vocations trying to obtain to realize the freedom of the members of the families. This is another thing, because, for example, in Europe sometimes, if I look at the family taxations, you find European Parliament, but also some European states that do not want a taxation on family basis, because it's a way is a way too much convenient for the women who want to stay at home. So it means that the state has an idea of family. I think this is the difference, because I can accept the differences between cultural perspectives, economical perspectives. Is something normal. We cannot have the same legal and tax systems for families, but the goal could be the same. So when there is an ideal type of families, I think that we are in danger, because it means that the freedom of the families can put in risk. Otherwise, we can accept and discuss. I think that it could be interesting even to have some answer from who wants to keep on the discussion on this point.
Comments?
Just that I think that you do hit on a point, and what's incredible is we're all here from different countries and we're facing a similar issue, and our fertility rates might be falling at different rates, but hopefully there are some true policies that you can find, and this is what I was trying to do, Jeanette, before, where you're looking through the data and looking at some of the symptoms. I do feel like we keep talking about the symptoms of a bigger issue here, and I will tell you, and I didn't include this in my remarks, I feel like as an elected official talking about religion isn't something that's usually encouraged, but I do feel like the undercurrent here is religion and religiosity and the ability to believe in a higher power, and in my case in a God that loves me and my family, and that there's a divine purpose. And I feel like especially it's amazing because Rick shared one of the quotes on our Constitution. The other one is that James Madison wrote that our Constitution, the U.S. Constitution, requires sufficient virtue among men for self-government. Otherwise, nothing less than the chains of despotism can restrain from them from destroying and devouring one another. As our children become less and less religious, I actually think that's a major connection to fertility, and the data backs that up, and that women who are religious and have children are the most happy. It doesn't say American women, it says women across the world. And so I guess the more we become a godless world, the more of these problems we're going to see, and no government can fix that. So one of the issues I grapple with as a policymaker is, especially in the United States, it is not my job to dictate religion to someone. So what's not happening in our homes? What's not happening around the dinner table that encourages people to believe in God and encourages people to build a family, right? And so that's where, again, I come back to, whether it's a public awareness campaign or something to wake parents up on what's happening would be helpful. And to your point, though, I do think it is also challenging when we compare systems, because we look at it and we say, oh yeah, I don't think that could work. But I do think there are some truisms that we can find today that we can take home to try and implement.
Interesting. Anything else?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, it's back to the storytelling part, because, and I'm not as deep into policy making as some of you are, but one of the things that I find from also an observer of politics is that narratives follow policies. So an example in Denmark would be with this stay-at-home mom debate, the narrative is that it's costly for society. We don't want to pay for you to stay at home with your children, even if it's suggested as a tax deduction. Then it's someone else paying because we are losing your work, you're losing your tax money. But one of the things that I've had calculated is that an average family, a man and a woman who goes to work and earns an average salary and have two children in subsidized daycare, the one parent, the second earner, does not pay enough tax to pay for even the subsidies of the daycare. But this is something that's totally out of the normal person will never know this. This is not a part of the narrative, because I go to work, I pay taxes, and so I contribute to society. But it's financially not even correct. And so there is some storytelling around the policies we already have that's super important to support a movement or a culture that is wanting to do something. So many women who are saying, well, I want freedom of choice, I want to choose, or families are saying, I want to be able to choose if I'm doing this or that or the third thing with my children's childhood. But the narrative around our systems is, well, that's a cost and this is a contribution. And so there's something there that needs to be stirred up in terms of how we talk about the systems we already have in place, regardless of what they look like.
Exactly.
It's the focus and the lens we share them through, I think.
Any other comments? Marco, can I ask another American question? But Candice started this one. There are very different approaches between general and specific country EU policies in the United States, and yet we're both struggling with issues including birth rate, prioritization of families. What do you make of that? Because I could draw a conclusion from the outside that, well, there are countries within the EU, it appears it would be easier to have a family if you chose to do so, because there are more what we'd call in the U.S. safety net programs, or more things to take care of you, and yet that's not moving the needle in the EU either. What is your take on that?
Yeah, this is the reason why we are still investigating this fertility gap. Basically, it appears, of course, it must be a sum of several topics, but we need to understand which are the most relevant ones. Now, is it housing? Is it the availability of support, be it kindergartens or whatever else? Is it the choice between career and family? Is it because indeed, let's say you jump in your career during your 30s, so you don't want to lose that moment, basically, so you don't want to stay out of the job market in those very years? Is it something else? This is something we're trying to really understand, deeply understand. I mean, of course, we can go out and ask people in the street, but that wouldn't be deep enough as we want to do it. This is why it's taking us a bit longer. But we are exactly investigating that.
Well, I think you've really made a powerful statement there. I stated earlier that policy should do what policy can do, but that families, there's personal responsibility at play here. And identifying what policy can and should do I think is one of the most critical questions, because we can then be clear with people and say, you have a responsibility in these other areas, whether it's how you approach the concept of family or work or.
On that, can I really quick
Sure.
jump in? I think it hits on culture again. Like the government we can wave our magic wands all day, but if the culture doesn't change, and I'll tell you, I have the opportunity to talk to a lot of young women. There are moms who say like, I want you to meet my daughter, or I'll speak in front of the Girl Scouts or the Girls of America groups, right? And I'll have girls come up to me and say, I want to be in Congress now, or I want to be in the legislature like you, which is amazing. But I was speaking to one group in particular and had shared that I have a 6-year-old and a 20-month-old, as I've mentioned. And I was walking through those dynamics, and a woman, roughly my age, came up to me and said, I've been married for several years now, but I did not want to have children because I thought it meant I'd have to give up my career. Tonight I'm going home and telling my husband we can have kids now. And she said, I can now see that it can work. And it was from us having a conversation. We've talked about this, a lot of the conversations today around, we are telling women, go be the superwoman, go kick butt on Wall Street, like all the things. And also, at some point, you got to be a mom. There is a reality of a fertility clock. And at some point, these two are at odds with each other. And until you find a partner, a husband, who is equally yoked and committed to your dream with you, then you can do these simultaneously. But that's not the story on Hallmark. That's not the story on Netflix or whatever television show it is here. But that's the reality. And that moment will be the one I remember probably more than the girl telling me she wants to run for Congress, because it made a difference for her seeing it. You don't see that. You don't. And I think until there's a culture shift that glorifies the husband who has a strong wife, and he's not an idiot, and he is strong and comfortable standing in his own 2 shoes, where men can feel comfortable in these new roles, I think we're going to have a hard time, because you can't legislate that. You have to change the culture.
Okay, can I add something?
Please.
And just on my way here, I was thinking about freedom. And in many ways, we have had such great success with freeing ourselves from many things, from poverty, from having to do a lot of things ourselves, just even doing the dishes. We've freed ourselves from many very annoying and difficult things. But it's almost like we've become so used to being able to free ourselves from burdens that we are also believing, and I've met people who believe I can unburden myself from having to give. Oh, what if the man could give birth? There are some things that we simply cannot free ourselves from. They come with life, and as we are focused on creating independence, woman from the man, the dependence with childbirth that comes with raising children is not something that you can just make disappear. You can shift it. So you can shift it to the state, or you can shift it over to a system, but you cannot make it disappear. And so the question is, are we willing to shift so much of this away from ourselves? What happens when we shift it away to a different place? So I agree with you. There are just some things that we have to face and realize this is part of life, and what consequences are we willing to bear? Because there are consequences with every choice, and if you choose to stay at home, there are some consequences with that. But do you want systems to alleviate it, or do you want relationships to alleviate it? And systems, I just have to say, they can't love you. They're not caring in nature as people are.
So, Lisa, I'm going to have to talk to you after this discussion, because I have not freed myself from doing dishes. I may need to talk to my wife about that as well. We do have a dishwasher. Got to break more dishes, and I won't be asked as much. But I just want to, I'm glad we kind of stumbled back. I wanted to make this comment when Maya and Emma were speaking, and I want to give them a homework assignment, because they need to teach all of the young people in the world that 1 + 1 = 6. And let me explain. When I met my wife, we couldn't have possibly afforded, to buy diapers or raise kids. But after we got married, the 1 + 1, after several years, we ended up with 6 in our family, because we had 4 kids. And there's something special about marriage, because and I really appreciated both Emma and Maya's presentations, because if you think about it, well, let me have any of you ever seen a magic eye image, or an image that's blurry, that if you kind of focus away from it, then it kind of comes in into vision. Do you know what I'm talking about? In the U.S., we have some of these called Magic Eye. But I think that this in somehow is true for marriage because if you say, as a woman, you're going to have less time to pamper yourself, you're going to have less time with your husband if you have kids, but yet you're going to be happier. But somehow that is, I think, the case. And I don't know how many people I know who are, well, let me ask Bruce and Jean in the back. I've heard, I know you two have been successful in many ways in lives, and many people that have been financially successful that I've talked to, they'll say our happiest time was when we were in college and we could barely afford, to buy food, and we could barely scrape together enough money to pay rent. I don't know if that's been true in your lives, but I've heard so many wealthy Americans say that their happiest times when they had nothing, and I think that perspective of 1 + 1 = 6, the math doesn't check out, but somehow in marriage it does check out because I don't know if it's God or the universe, but they have a way of filling in those gaps. And the last thing I'll say is my wife and I are now in a stage, our youngest got married a year ago, and so we're kind of coming back to where we have more time for ourselves, which is nice. But our happiest times, and this doesn't say a lot for me, but our happiest times are when we're with our grandkids now. So there's something about marriage that you can't map it on paper, but it just works.
Bruce has a look on his face as if he might want to say something, and then we'll come to you.
It is more comfortable to not be a starving newlywed. But that was a joyful time.
Yeah.
And it was worth doing. And we've got more stories together. We've got lots to talk about. It's worth it every bit.
Thank you.
And
Please.
the final word?
I wanted to ask about your perspective on pension system for mothers, because in Poland that's a really huge topic. And also, for example, my mom, who has 6 children, and she wasn't working for a while because she was raising us. And at the end, she has nothing. I mean, she has some money from her husband, and they are together, so it's okay. But I know that our government is really thinking about what to do with, and maybe somehow convince women to have more children, but then give them some pension at the end, so they have something. And I wanted to ask, how is it in your countries, and do you even have this topic coming up?
That's an interesting question. And we've got potentially 4 different views here. I'd love to hear. Marco, do you want to respond to that first?
Yes, I don't represent the country here, so there is no state pension. But at least in the country I come from, we have this what we call, I don't know whether the translation is correct, a reversibility pension. So that basically women, or at least the surviving partner of a pensioner, let's say if he or she has no income, can have a fraction of the pension of the deceased partner, who for the rest of his or her life. Usually, of course, it's women, because women live longer, and because usually it's men, the ones who have traditionally a pension. So that exists, but of course, politically speaking, that's the easiest target when it comes to cutting pensions, because it's pensions for people who didn't pay into the system. So that is the only example I can give you.
Lisa?
Well, in Denmark, right now, pension is completely individual, and it's a big topic in our country, especially with this awakening or movement, you can say, about what's motherhood and what's fatherhood and career and all these things. So it's a big issue, and many are using it to say, well, women need to work more. They can't stay home with the children because then they're behind with pensions. One of the things that we have come out and suggested is that we put pension back, and I say back because it used to be there, but into the marriage contract, that it's part of the marriage FOMU, what's that? And so that's one of the things that we have suggested, and I remember specifically when this policy suggestion came out, it was very controversial, and I had to even write some articles about it because many people were upset, but that's my money. It's very individually based, and independence is a very big focus and it's been touched upon, this of strengthening the union between parents, and I think that's a very important component if we want to have the freedom for moms and dads to choose how to create their lives in different phases. So it's a very big topic. It's a serious issue for many women because it's in many ways just simply an unfair to view, an unfair way to treat women, essentially. Yeah.
So in the United States, in 1989, 50% of retirees had some type of defined benefit pension plan. That's dropped in half today, so now it's about 25%. And it's expected to drop in half again in the next 2 or 3 decades. And so today, only really government workers and union workers would have a potential pension. In Utah, we've migrated for our state employees and our government workers, we've migrated from what's called a defined benefit. Well, you're guaranteed to get this much every month when, after you retire until you die, to what's called a defined contribution. And that is, we're going to put this much in your 401k and good luck. But we had to do that or else we would eventually have gone bankrupt.
And I would just say we don't have a deficit in Utah. We have constitutionally every year we balance our budget, and so a lot of states who had pension programs were bankrupting. But I will say this is a big issue because again, it's how do you quantify motherhood? How do you? And there was a study done in the U.S. that actually showed that a full-time stay-at-home mom, and I have issues with how we say that because you're never not a mom, but not working in the market. Were they to put that same amount of work and effort and time into the private sector, they'd be making anywhere from $150,000 to $190,000. And so, they've tried to quantify how much that is, right? So I tell that to women who are like, well, I'm just a stay-at-home mom. I'm like, no, that's a lot of work. But there have been ideas thrown around Social Security, like Marco Rubio, who's now doing 5 different jobs in this administration,
Including Secretary of State.
But Secretary of State had the idea while he was in Congress that you could actually draw down from your Social Security for childcare or other expenses because you paid into it. But yeah, we're definitely set up differently where you have a 401k and a retirement plan. And I think in the case you're talking about, if their spouse were to die, we would have a life insurance policy that would more likely kick in. Yeah.
Because in Poland, it's a paradox, I would say, that, for example, my mom who has 6 kids, at the end, she has no money, but someone who at the end decided not to have children, he has a lot of money coming from pension, which is somehow ridiculous because, again, at the end, my mom's children, which is us, we will be paying this pension for others.
Yeah.
So this is really something I can imagine might help to decide for women to have more children if they would have this, this security thing in the future made for them. If you have, and in Poland now, I think it's a new thing, so I'm not sure, but I think if you have at least four children, you will get some very small, but still some money from pension. But you have to have at least 4 children.
In Hungary, the women with 4 children
And no tax.
don't pay tax and even a social contribution in Hungary.
I think it's in a lot of ways, in my opinion, about who bears the expense of child rearing. In many countries, it seems to be it's the woman, and it used to be the family as a collective, and women couldn't vote, and there was all these situations in society that made it a non-issue. But as we've then changed the fabric of some of ways in society, we haven't followed up with research. Well, so who is going to bear the cost of child rearing? This book that came out that I was referring to earlier by Nina Smith, the financial professor, she put into the calculations also when you have a child that costs the state this amount of money and it costs a lack of tax in this way. But it's very paradoxical to put the expense of childbirth on a woman because it takes 2 people to create a child. Just because I'm doing the painful part doesn't mean that it's my expense to bear. And this is one of the problems is you cannot erase this dependence from a woman who is giving birth to a child, but you can decide where the dependence is supposed to be. Is it the state or a system or is it a partner? Where are we putting the expectation of this expense to be bared. And that's where my personal opinion is we need to put a lot of it back into marriage. We need to have men step up and feel excited that, I can do that for my woman. I can, in personal experiences, my husband does that for me. He's done, from the very beginning, he said to me, if you're willing to have these children, I will provide for you always. And we have systems in place in our marriage that we have agreed upon is a way to share the burden. But we are also penalized in our country, not just culturally, but also financially. We're penalized for this model. And I think there's something very interesting culturally about the fact that my husband, he could hire a different woman. He could hire a stranger to take care of his 4 children or 5 children now with heavy subsidies. He would have to pay this amount. But if he's trying to have me do it, it will cost us this much, and he will have to enter also a different tax bracket. If he's doing the very best he can to provide for his family and earn a certain amount of money so he can provide for a large family, he will enter a different tax bracket. So in many ways, it's heavily penalized to structure the family in a different way than 2 working parents and sending your children to daycare.
And that's a perverse government incentive, right? Where they're not aligning.
Yes.
Really quick, Rick, I know you probably want to move on, but I wanted to just give you.
This is an interesting topic.
So in Utah, we actually, though, are very serious about it being the man and the woman's responsibility. We're a pro-life state, and we take that seriously beyond birth. And so we actually passed a law that you cannot have a fishing or hunting license, which is a big deal in Utah, if you're in the rears for child support. So if
Somewhat a rear. Yeah,
if you're not paying child support. So, which actually got people to start paying their child support because we have a lot of hunters and fishers in Utah. We also have it to where a woman can, if you go to the hospital and the man has since left, you can bill that man half of the hospital costs for having the baby. So again, we may not have like a pension system, but there are things you can do in policy that says, man, woman, you are responsible for this child, and the state views it that way. Yeah.
And I was actually the Senate sponsor of that fishing license bill. But I just want to tell you, one of the things that I put into that bill is if they're making an effort, if they go in and say, here's my plan to catch up on the back child support, and they start making payments, then they can get a hunting and fishing license because we are hunters and fishers in Utah. So.
The question's a little
Carry on.
difficult for me because you're young and you can prepare now for whatever you wish to do with retirement and so forth. My wife took care of our 3 children, and we've been married 40 years. She has a claim to the Social Security. I have my Social Security or pension, and then she gets half of it legally. And if we were to divorce, she would get half of everything. So marriage is the commitment. We've talked about covenant and contract today. But if you can stay married and work through it and grow together and figure out your retirement together, then that is best rather than relying on America or Denmark or wherever, Poland, to do that. Now, if a mother is left and a husband is gone and your mother raises 4 children, what is the outcome for that? That's a very big question. And part of it is that you as her children likely will step up and care for her, just as old systems have. So there are many, many ways to do this, but who cares for whom? The mother and the husband and wife care for each other. They care for their children care for them. We all care for our grandparents. It's just we're a little backward because we're so looking for an easy solution to something that has always been a very difficult burden.
So there's a philosophy underlying this question, or philosophies that need to be examined.
But I almost want to heed a warning in this regard, because one of the issues that I really have with the culture in Denmark is that this type of thinking that you're just mentioning now is stifled, I think, when systems grow very large, because there is a tendency to think, well, someone should do that because I pay for that. It's kind of the incentive. A lot of civic engagement it's not as big in Denmark, and I would assume European countries that have high levels of redistribution, because the incentive is kind of going away. We have very many lonely elderly people because their grandchildren and children are not taking care of them. So it's just a little bit of a red flag, I could say, is because when you do put much of the dependency and fixing the problems onto the state, it de-incentivizes the civic
I agree.
engagement to
I
do
agree
these
100%. I don't think it should be with the state. Social Security in America, there's not enough money by 2034, so we're less than 10 years away, and no one will grab a hold of it because it's so difficult. So yeah, they've set up a thing that doesn't quite work.
I can give you a specific example. My mother-in-law, she lived in America for 30-some years and moved back. And when she moved back and her son was in school, she was hearing from them about some problem they had with costumes for a play. And she was like, I can do that. I've done that many times in America. But she was told by the school system, oh, no, we can't. You can't do that. That's a school issue. You know, we can't have, because we can't make a difference for different schools. So this school can't be better off than that school. That's one of the things that's possible we have the free school system of private schools. That's a part of the DNA of some of the free schools, is that parents engage. And in many areas of life in Denmark, it's very hard or difficult. If you want to civically engage, it's very difficult to do so because we have so many rules and so many hoops you have to jump through. So many people simply just say, oh, that's not my area, that's someone else's
Can I ask one thing, Lisa? If you could recreate it, I'm very interested in you talking about the pro-work policies versus pro-family policies, and people are giving 50% of their income into this state. So if you could create it from scratch, what would you do? What would be the policies, given that there's the resources are there?
Well, some of the things that we're focused on now is that we're trying to tell people that we don't want to dismantle the welfare system. We want to liberalize it. That's what I personally want to do. So, for example, we don't want to remove the benefits of having affordable care so that women can enter the workforce without it being too costly, but we want to liberalize it. So, for example, let the money follow the children. And so liberalizing the funding systems we have is giving the choice and power back to the people. So we fund what is wanted, and we don't fund what the government finds to be the good solutions. We have a lot of top-down. Well, we think this is good, let's implement it everywhere. But you can jump in, Merete, if you have a...
Yeah, I can make a comment.
Yeah, you're free. She's much more expert than I am. Yeah.
So if you focus on just one thing, the daycare system in Denmark, it's very expensive, but as Lisa said, we don't want to be Switzerland. I mean, in Switzerland, they have very little daycare, and if you're a woman in Switzerland, you want to have a job and take care of your kids, that's almost impossible. It's really, really hard, because people work until late and stuff like that. So we want to have daycare, but we want to have more flexibility, and we want to use new technology, for example AI, to say that, okay, I only want to pay for the hours when my kid is there. That's actually possible. I mean, you can arrange that. You can make that work. So in Denmark, you have kids who don't go for summer vacation. The parents, they will have their summer vacation without the kids, and I find that deeply troubling. I mean, you have little kids 2 years old staying in daycare when their parents are at home, or I don't know, doing something. So if you just say, like, you pay only for the hours when your kid is there, then you have also an economical incentive to pick up the child if you're actually home. So it's seen from the perspective of the child more than you say the system, and also the parents, actually, because if the child wants to be with his mom and dad, so if they're off from work, then there's an incentive to pick up the child. That's one thing. But we have, as I told one of your colleagues, we have a complete family program. I love to take you all through it, but it takes too much time.
Yeah.
But that's one thing, that we want to have more flexibility, and we want the money to follow the child and the rights of the child.
It's like vouchers for.
Yeah.
Can I just, Rick? I know we're like.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
on.
I just want-
We're in the hole
we,
here.
Yeah, we have time for...
Really quick, one thing that keeps coming up that I keep hearing, and again, this is amazing to come here as an American, because you think everyone thinks like you, and then you come and say everyone thinks differently. No, I'm just kidding. I don't think that. But a word we keep saying is equity and fair, and there's a difference here in that I don't think it's the government's job to guarantee equal outcomes. I think that equal opportunity is something we talk about. But there are differences. And growing up, my dad used to always say, life's not fair, Candice. Life's not fair. You got to work hard. Life's not fair. There are some things in life that government cannot fix. It is just and so sometimes I think we just have to walk away and say, like, it is not the government's job to guarantee an equitable outcome, right? It's that you have a fair playing field, or at least even that we can't guarantee, right? And so, and I know we have difference of philosophies up here, but I think it takes you down a big rabbit hole when you expect government to do everything, and it then impedes on what the family should be doing. And to Doug's point, that your children, my gosh, if mom raised you for 40 years, you better believe I'll be the first person at my mom's door if she needs something. And this like cohesiveness in the family, if we think, oh, the government will do it, right, might not happen.
Joe, I have 5 minutes left, right, Francesco?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to save it, and it's actually teed up better than I expected. Could I ask each of you, and here we are with an issue that there could be many perspectives, many approaches to, and we have in front of this group people elected to represent their constituents in solving these problems. The good news there is you were all elected to represent people and solve these problems. Could I have you just take a minute and talk about how fortunate we are to be able to gather and have these conversations and maybe speak on behalf of representative government and what you'd like your constituents to remember as you face these difficult problems? Marca, would you?
Yes, I'm in an odd spot because I'm not elected, but but I work for elected people, so
Right.
yes, so I'm trying to wear their shoes, let's say. I think that before doing the current job, I've been also a parliamentary assistant, and one of the MEPs I've been working for was always telling me that we are obliged to try, not necessarily to succeed. So that was a bit, at least his philosophy. Sometimes I was saying yes, but this won't work, and he was saying yeah, but we need to try. I know it won't work, but still we need to try. Also because, luckily enough, in this field, there are some things that magically work. At some point, we learned it through experience. Actually, that there have been some people trying to do something, and then someone else came, did the same, and it had different results. So let's say sometimes what can make the difference are the soft conditions, not the hard ones. So what I would like, let's say, the voters of the people I serve to remember is. That we don't just try to achieve a certain goal, but we also try to make the conditions around, let's say, more conducive to that kind of result. So,
Thank you. That makes sense. Lisa?
Well, I'll start off by saying I'm only temporarily elected because I'm filling in for our party leader who's on parental leave with his baby. Hopefully I'll be elected on my own mandate next time. But when the news came out that I was filling in for him, there were a heavy comment section, and some people were saying, what qualifies her to fill in for that mandate? What is on her resume? She's been home for 9 years. She's going to be eaten for dinner. And I remember just almost laughing because the very fabric, I think, of democracy is representation. And the group that I'm representing, and I'm finding more and more women saying, oh, yeah, oh, it's so nice. Also many in the conversation, oh, finally a family-orientated woman who's done something else than just work in a million businesses. So it's for me, it's about representing a growing part of society and having the glasses on, the perspective of many people in our country who want to have a different focus on these policies, who don't necessarily want their children to be picked up to relieve them of a stressful morning. And so that's what I hope and aim to represent, is just a different perspective, which is what I think democracy is about, is representing real people.
Another good answer, Candice.
Well, I think that, it's a humbling question, too, to put it into perspective. And I often think of, and I have it hanging on my wall in the Capitol in Utah, The Man in the Arena, if you haven't read that poem by Teddy Roosevelt, but he talks about the man, or woman in this case, right, who is marred and face in the dust and sweaty, and they're working their hardest in the arena, and there are people on the sidelines who aren't willing to jump into the arena, but they are yelling out to you, and there's the cheap seats who are criticizing you. And sometimes it feels that way. I feel like in elected office that you're just getting up punch after punch, and you keep getting up. But really, decisions are made by people who show up. That has been a principle I have learned since 6th grade when I ran for student body office, and it has consistently been the same. I represent 48,000 people in Utah, and when I hold a town hall, usually 12 to 15 people come. And those 12 to 15 people have an oversized voice because they took the time to show up. And so I always invite my constituents, and I would invite everyone in the room to get in the arena with me. And we have a lot of great policy ideas that I think need to make their way to policymakers so that we can actually make a difference and implement something that will help people.
Thank you. Candice mentioned what she had in her office. At the Capitol, I have in my office a plaque that my wife gave me. It said, "Behind every successful man is a wife rolling her eyes." And that kind of keeps me humble. So as a state senator, I represent about 122,000 people. And if you were to randomly kidnap my constituents off the street and hold a gun to their head and say, "Who is your state senator?" most of them would not survive that test. And I'm very cognizant that I'm a down ballot race, which means people show up to vote either for or against Trump, and then they're like, "Oh, there's other people here." And about halfway down the ballot, then my name appears. I do find that most of the mentally ill people in my district do know who I am because they contact me regularly, and that's fun for them. I often joke that of the people, of the 3% or so of the people in my district who know who I am, at least a half of them hate me. So that's also fun. But it is wonderful. I've been elected like 4 times in a row, started in 2012 and then reelected in 2016, 2020, and then just again last year in 2024. And to me, it's an incredible responsibility because even though most people in my district, don't know who I am, including about half of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles who live in my district, by the way, and I'm always worried because I know they're voting for or against me. But I bear this I feel this incredible responsibility that I need to do what I think the majority of them would do if they had the information I had. And so often people are asking me, do you just do what you want to do, or do you try to do what your district does? And it's like, well, I can't pull every issue. We take, as legislators, we take about 1,000 votes every session, and our session's only like 7 weeks long. And so, of course, I can't call up 122,000 people and say, "What do you think about this issue?" But I think I feel like, and maybe this is self-deception, but I feel like that I'm uniquely kind of positioned where most of my personal views, I think, align with the majority of my district. And some of those you have to guess on, other ones, you don't. But I think it's wonderful that we have a representative democracy. I know how much I didn't know when I was elected, and the longer I stay, the more I know because I learn, but also the more enemies I accumulate. So that's the beauty of being an elected official. So that's a long answer to a short question.
No, these are good answers. Thank you. Can we thank our panelists?